Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics. This week's questions answered video, what are your recommended instructors? This is a great question, something I brought up in classes, I bring up in classes, I should say, at the end of every class. I say, I'd love to see everybody again, but please do not get all your training from me. There are a great number of really good instructors out there. So you shouldn't just get all your training from one house of thought, because as instructors we all have different backgrounds, different approaches, different focuses. We look at things slightly differently. So it's good to kind of vary your training as much as possible. You don't necessarily need a big name instructor to learn things, because at some point all of us were just starting out. We just hung our shingle out on the wall, so to speak, and went into business and started teaching. Some people literally come from their profession, be it law enforcement, military, and they go immediately into teaching. And their resume is obviously going to help that, but they still have to get their name out there. Some people come from no law enforcement, no military background, but they still have a great deal of information they can share with people based on their life experiences or their philosophy as they approach to shooting. So again, big believer in seeking outside instruction outside of myself, but people ask me, what are your recommended instructors? And while that's a very long list, I'm going to go through some of the ones that are just kind of top ahead, and the guys that I recommend, that are going to give you, in regards to the way that I teach, a greater understanding of certain things that I don't necessarily focus as hard on, or they're a little bit outside of my lane, and I'd rather someone who's more proficient in it teach those things. First up, Steve Fisher. And these are in no particular order. Steve, so don't go get a bigger head than you already have. Steve's nickname is the Yeti. Steve runs Sentinel Concepts. Steve is a great, no-nonsense, no-bullshit instructor. If you have a problem with profanity, his class might be a little offensive to you, but it's no big deal. Steve is a great instructor. He's got a really solid background in just the immersion. He's got a law enforcement background, but he's also got a great background in teaching and learning from other instructors. If you've been following for a while, you're familiar. He used to teach for Magpul Dynamics back when Magpul Dynamics was a thing. Me and Steve get along because we have some of the same teaching practices, or at least some of the same philosophies, but we also differ in certain areas, and it leads to great discussion, which I would like to think makes both of us better instructors when it comes to our application of the craft to the student. So if you're looking for then Steve's pretty much a self-defense focused instructor, but he does hold his students to really high accuracy standards, just like I do. Steve's a great guy to take a class from. He travels all over the US, so it shouldn't be hard to get into a Sentinel Concepts class. Will Petty. If you're looking for a vehicle class, Petty's VCB program is the collegiate level training on vehicle. He's going to go super in depth on vehicle ballistics. He's going to kill myths. He's going to give you the science behind things. He's going to give you the whys as well as the hows, which is something that's very important. I'm a big vehicle guy myself. That's probably one of my favorite classes to teach. However, if I had to really put a name on it, I'd say I teach vehicle stuff at the high school level, whereas Petty is teaching, like I said, at the collegiate level. So if you want to further your understanding, your education, your knowledge, and really have your abilities pushed to the limit, especially in regards to problem solving, shooting, accuracy, working vehicles, then Will Petty is definitely a big recommendation of mine. Frank Proctor, if you're not familiar with Way of the Gun, Frank Proctor is a really good instructor. I've been following Frank for, well, as long as I've known about him, checked out what he's put out there, and I really like his philosophy and his approach to shooting. He's got a strong military background, but he doesn't hang that, in my opinion anyway, he doesn't hang that primarily in front of people in order to get them to come take his classes. He is interested in running the gun mechanically better, so he's taking some of that combat application experience and applying it to more of a performance-based shooting, so people learn how to run the gun mechanically better, mechanically faster. It's almost like a hybrid between self-defense shooting and competition shooting, which I really do appreciate. John Lovell from Warrior Poet Society. John has, and I don't want to steal this right out of the name of his company, but he does have a very poetic approach to the way that he teaches what he teaches. I appreciate his teaching methodology that I've seen because it's almost as if he's having a conversation other than what he's talking about. It's a very, I guess, organic way, holistic, if you will, not using holistic in the bad, using it in the good way, holistic way to approach getting people to understand the concepts and principles of what he's attempting to teach. And that's something that, and I'm guilty of this too, we get bogged down in certain terminologies and certain languages, and we tend to repeat ourselves And we get closer to being, I should say, dangerously close to using buzzwords. We want to try to avoid those cliche things. I definitely don't want to memorize every single line I'm going to say because I need to approach every class differently. There are some words that I'm going to use quite frequently because they fit the situation, but you run the risk of people becoming desensitized to what you're trying to tell them or what you're trying to put out there to the greater shooting public if you constantly say the exact same thing every single time, regardless of what the question was. So the way that John approaches things is refreshing to me, and I do like to see instructors who they don't take the craft, if you will, the art, if you will, of instruction as it's got to follow this formula, or it's not going to be effective, or it's not going to be respected as if other people do it that way as well. Ernest Langdon is another big recommendation of mine. Haven't personally taken a class from Ernest, but I have been following him for some time. I'm actually trying to get into one of his classes this year. Again, somewhat similar to Frank, but with his own flair and with his own experiences, backgrounds, and focuses, he does take an approach of, I'm going to take self-defense shooting and some competition shooting, I'm going to kind of mix it together. Again, he may not agree with that assessment, but his formula, his approach to the way that he's going to teach the firearm is very, very focused on efficiency. And that leads me into my next instructor. Mike Pannone. Most people know who Mike Pannone is. If you don't, then of course you can Google him. He takes a very, very critical look at the kinesthetics and the ergonomics and the efficiencies of the human body and how best to run the gun based on maximizing your efficiencies no matter what you're doing. Something as simple as the way that you draw the gun or how your reloading method may be wasting energy or wasting efficiency. I am, and I'm sure I've got some fans right now waiting for me to say it. I'm very pedantic. There you go. That's the first one, probably the last one of the video. I'm very pedantic when it comes to understanding the psychophysiological aspects of self-defense shooting. And Mike Pannone is, again, high school level is where I'm at. Mike's up here at the collegiate level. He's going to give you a greater understanding and a greater appreciation. He's going to help you identify mistakes or inefficiencies that you didn't even realize you're making. And for that alone, for him to be able to come in and fix just one or two or three small efficiencies, it's going to save you time down the road, time that you didn't even know you were wasting or time that you didn't even know you had. I think any really good shooter, anybody who's serious about self-defense shooting or competition shooting can definitely appreciate that. Lastly, but certainly not least, is John Dufresne. John Dufresne is an instructor for Sage Dynamics. I'm not bringing him up just so I keep your business, but I do like the fact, especially for people who've already come through a defensive handgun or a defensive rifle or what have you class that I taught, it would be really beneficial for you, especially since you got that sweet alumni discount, to take a class from John. The reason I say that is John teaches the Sage program, but through his own eyes and his own experience. And that's going to give you the same program, but from a different aspect and with a different focuser, I should say, understanding of function of what you're doing or what you're being instructed based on how John teaches. Sometimes it's good to hear the same story from two different people, and sometimes it's good to take the same class from two different people because, again, like I said, you're going to get a different approach, a different methodology, and they may help you understand something that maybe I couldn't. Or maybe you take a class from John and then you come see me and I teach you something that maybe John couldn't quite make it, click like, oh, that makes total sense. So there is great value in that. Now, I do understand training is expensive. Usually usually the cheapest part of training is the class itself, and then you got to factor in lodging, food, ammunition, travel, things of that nature. So I do understand. So I wanted to keep this list somewhat short, but I wanted to hit some very big high points, and I wanted to give you guys an idea of who are some of the instructors just top of mind that I'm going to look to when somebody asks me for a recommendation of one instructor that they should train from. But by all means, even if you've never heard of the guy or he doesn't have a lot of analytics on Google, he may still have good stuff to teach you. So your local guy who's teaching $100 handgun courses, it might be worth it. It probably will be worth it. You're going to learn something, even if it's what not to do. But you're going to learn something, and you got to give those guys a chance because every single instructor was there at one point in their career, and it's the foundational students that, one, help them get their name out through word of mouth, but two, you also help them refine their craft. So if you take a class from them later down the road, the teaching quality should be better. The content should be better. It should be more refined. The rough edges have been trimmed off. The efficiency has been built into the training program, and maybe the second or third time you get with that instructor for a class, it's like a whole new person, a whole new experience, because teaching, just like shooting, it's a perishable skill, but it's also something that consistently has to be refined, so we're giving our students the best that we have. I'm Aaron Cowell with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.